In the GDR, whenever somebody had sex, they would call up the Stasi, and the Stasi would walk inside and literally stand above the bed, looking at them. And then while they're having sex, he would hold up a picture of Stalin and hold it right above them. So if the guy is laying down, he would see a picture of Stalin instead of the woman he's having sex with. And the woman would be granted a picture of Stalin to hold on her breasts so that he can caress Stalin as well. Welcome. We have plenty of interesting things that we're going to talk about today. Mostly it's going to revolve around the female question. Oh, the females. Oh my God, the female. So we're going to look at a book that I never read, but my beautiful mods forced me into talking about it, especially Pandas. He was like, man, we got to talk about why women had better sex in socialism. So we have a video of the author of the book that we're going to take a look at and see maybe if that's true, that women really do have better sex when more of the means of production were owned, the means of a reproduction, if you know what I mean. Now, with that being said, are you guys interested in seeing why women apparently had better sex in socialism? Because I am very, very intrigued. It sounds like the ultimate pitch you can give all women on why to join a communist organization, even though it would be extremely creepy, especially for men to come up to women and be like, hey lady, would you like some better sex? Here's a pamphlet of what you should join. God fucking damn it. Yeah, Meloni, first NB Prime Minister. That's good. Okay, so let's move into that conversation. Communism's appreciation of women is part of what radicalized me, socialists in particular. Yeah, that's one of the best aspects of a material analysis, especially an intersectional one, which everybody should support, obviously, is that you understand that yes, that the deep root core of the main inadequacies of the capitalist system is the class dichotomy of oppressed and oppressor, of exploiter and exploited. But you start understanding that dichotomy not only applies to that, but applies to many different social structures inside of the broader capitalist superstructure, which leads you to understanding and sympathizing much rather with people in other structures, which are also in a relationship of exploiter and exploited. So in a way, Marxism de facto is sympathetic to all struggles of man and women and everyone else in their attempt to achieve a world which is, to say it as simply as possible, less problematic than the one that came before. Through that evolutionary trajectory from system to system, a socialist hopes that eventually all hierarchy can be removed from the equation and oppression as a concept can cease to exist. But we're starting off a bit too heavy. Let's talk about sex. Let's take a look at it. I believe this is the writer of the book, Socialist Sex. Anthropologist explains why women have better sex under communism.
And so as a social scientist, one of the things that I do and that social scientists do when they want to look at how to compare two economic systems and the impacts that they have on people's lives, because people were writing about the fact that capitalism was bad for our love lives way back in the middle of the 19th century. And so the question is how do we do an empirical test? Look for a natural experiment. And it turns out that, you know, Germany was one country in 1945, and then it got divided, and pretty much one side was capitalist, one side was communist. There were other, differences, but for the most part, they're the same. And they're divided for 40 years by this, 45 years by this ideology, and then they come back together. Let's look at the differences. And that's what's so fascinating about the research that we have, is that it really does show that, again, using largely self-reported data, but consistently studies that have been done both before and after 89 show that people show higher levels of satisfaction and contentment and joy in their personal lives in the East compared to the West.
And I thought that one of the most interesting parts of this is that you talk about how the end of the Cold War also had negative effects for the West in general, because the gains around women's rights, around employment, education, that were achieved by socialist or communist governments pressured the United States into doing that. And we saw that a lot with the civil rights movements, right? So it was like embarrassing the United States into being better on issues of racism. Can you talk about how that played out in gender?
So Mary Dudziak has this wonderful book called Cold War Civil Rights, which precisely talks about the Cold War context of the U.S. civil rights movement. And the book that I published in 2019, it's called Second World, Second Sex, and it does a sort of similar thing for the women's movement. So like very specifically, until 1957, Western male leaders largely thought of women's emancipation and arguments for women's emancipation as a communist front, right? So that communist appeal to women by convincing them that they would be happier if they could work outside the home or whatever. And so there's a wonderful book by Elaine Tyler May called Homeward Bound, which really talks about the kind of traditional American family as a Cold War artifact, especially in the 50s.
Thank you, Ora.
With the launch of the first Sputnik satellite, the American government goes, how the hell did they do that? Right? I mean, it's just a metal ball around the Earth that's beeping, right? But it scared people a lot. And one of the immediate
and that was always a combination of good old, like, just imperial racism of, the Easterners can't do shit that we are able to do, but also deep-seated hatred towards the communists that manifests itself in the ability for them to consider them completely incapable of doing anything. So if you define somebody as incapable of doing absolutely anything, and yet you see them, quote-unquote, pandering to particular groups and telling them, yo, you are going to actually receive equal treatment in our societies, at least an attempt at equal treatment, that is immediately seen as a lie. And it's a very easy way to pitch it to your local populace of black Americans or of women or of gay people that, hey, these people are, barbarians. Here you have it very badly. You have it very bad, but over there you're going to have it much, much worse. And that's exactly the Red Scare tactic that was used during that period, and it was extremely, extremely successful. You had people who were literal children of slaves that worked and reported to the FBI on clandestine black socialist organizing, etc., etc. I mean, Jesus Christ, the Black Panthers were literally destroyed by people of a minority that chose to serve the imperial project, because somehow they managed to internalize the imperial project, even though that imperial project was fucking hanging and whipping their parents and grandparents literally 30, 40 years ago. So if you can do that with somebody who is literally enslaved, you can most definitely play on that sort of sense of cultural and imperial superiority to get women on your side as well. But turns out women do be noticing when they're not coming, okay? Women do be noticing when they're not coming. And why are they not coming? Because they live in a society where the male is defined as the absolute god king of the household, because he is the only one who gets to bring the bread, and therefore he is the only one who gets to get what, Chad? The only one who gets to get sexual pleasure. So I'm sure that this is doing material analysis, and we want to finish the video, but it's also a very ideological thing. Just the way capitalism makes us think that absolutely everything is a competition and everything is dominating somebody else, and the higher we rise through this hierarchy of domination, the more successful we are. That is completely incompatible with the willingness to fully sexually satisfy your partner, because you are the dominant one, you are the main one, you're the one who gets to hoard all the pleasure, okay? Giving out things is the most opposite concept of capitalist logic. It's hoarding, 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 hoarding. And very often, even if they're giving out pleasure, it's because that's the main way that they get pleasure, right? People with this sort of mentality. So it's not only the fact that, as they said, you had much more free time. Women were materially more successful and allowed into the workforce, and not only that, but they were also supported much more by the state when they chose to be housewives, which allowed for more free time and more space for you not to be as stressed out as we are in modern capitalist society. So that we would literally have enough time to get fucking horny. Okay, nowadays horniness very often is kind of a tool of escaping from the stress. We turn on very sexual adult movies and so on to force ourselves into horniness so that we can escape our fucked up current reality, right? Instead of horniness just coming to us, because you're noticing horniness is not coming to us because we're thinking about these 700 different problems that we have in our life, because the system does not manage to help us out with any of them. Actually, the systems that the system had in place that were helping us out before, it's slowly pulling away and pulling away and pulling away, and you're having broader and broader kind of categories that you have to worry about, and the more they are, the more they take up your fucking every day, and the more they take up every day is less time for you to have a wet vajayjay or a hard pee-pee, okay? As simple as that. Sorry if it's kind of an awkward conversation, but that's the truth, quite literally, because imagine just the part about not having to pay rent. If that was not something that you would have to spend quite literally 20 to 30 days every month constantly obsessing over, which translated into normal language that isn't adapted to capitalist linguistics is stressing out about becoming homeless every day. Imagine if you didn't have to stress out about that. Imagine if accommodation was a human right. Oh my God, mind-blowing. So 1984 George Orwell. Imagine how much more time you would actually have that you could dedicate to things that you enjoy, including, of course, sex. God, probably you would do a lot more of it. But yes, let's not manspeak over this lovely author. Capitalism is literally a cockblock. Yes, Taikuero. Yeah, capitalism is a hardcore cockblock, a massive cockblock. I should say a tiny cockblock because it's not getting. You're getting my point.
Government had was that the Soviets were using women, that they had double the number of scientists.
I mean, how are people supposed to find the clit when they spend all their time thinking about rent?
Just double the number of scientific geniuses because they were identifying girls and giving them scientific education at an early age. So in 1958, the United States government passes the National Defense Education Act. And that is a piece of legislation that specifically earmarks money for the education of girls in math and science and engineering. Title IX, the legislation that we have that allows, that gives federal dollars for girls and women's sports, is also a reaction to the fact that the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries kept beating the United States at the Olympic medal count because of women's sports. We didn't have enough female athletes to compete against these amazing Soviet women who kept just clearing the decks of the gold medals.
And that's exactly the brilliant argument that you can use against absolutely everyone who says, okay, neoliberal capitalism bad, but we still manage to evolve and grow and, give civil rights, give equal rights to women, etc., etc. The only reason why the both cultural, ethnic, but most importantly, financial majority in the imperial core has given you any fucking rights is because there was a country over the fucking pond that was giving them out left and right. So the only way that they could argue that they were freer than that place is adopt at least a few of those concepts that have been spreading like wildfire over there. I mean, the existence of the modern welfare state in Norway, Sweden, etc., was literally created because the Soviet Union was right across the door and they needed to somehow stifle radicalization of the local populace. So, yeah, every single right, I don't think this is controversial to say, every single right that we have ever earned from a dominant class was by intimidating the shit out of them, that if they don't give it to us, they're going to get kicked out. But even that is not very long-term sustainable because they will never give the one thing that makes them the elite in the first place. And eventually that contradiction gets too heavy that we kick them out as well. But they're buying their time and they're buying their time and they're buying their time until, I don't know, they can make fucking Mars rockets. And then they can have the robot butlers upstairs.
I can give you a lot of other examples. 1961, the first Presidential Commission on the Status of Women, which was signed by Executive Order 10980, I believe, by John F. Kennedy. In the preamble of that executive order, Kennedy cites national security as a reason why we need...
Legendary, man. Americans be given women rights because it's a national security risk that all the females will become communists. Legendary. America is so blue-pilled, it will give women rights instead of embracing socialism.
To think about women's rights.
Tell that to the red pill crowd, man. The American right gave women all those rights.
So we were scared. There was a fear that if the Soviets mobilized their women into the labor force and they were able to use women's intelligence. Another great example, if you guys have been watching The Queen's Gambit, is Soviet women's chess.
Yeah.
In the international realm, the Soviet women were amazing at chess. They just couldn't be beaten. So there are all sorts of ways in which, to the extent that American men in particular, but I would say a sort of brand of conservative 50s, because obviously this wouldn't be true of people who are affiliated with the left, right? Like, the CPUSA, all these people who were purged by Huok and McCarthy. Right. But
everything that was granted because they were afraid of communist threat. But not only that, as Kristen right here managed to put out very eloquently, they couldn't be seen as lacking in absolutely anything. So because of sports, they had to invest more in women's sports, but also because, dude, you're not utilizing 50% of your population. And that's kind of where we go into the conversation of, to an extent, even the commodification of feminism by late-stage capitalism, in which it turned this absolute beautiful movement which wanted to liberate women into just another way to create more proletarians to fill its factories and its programmer schools and its machine for additional profit generation and output.
The kind of conservative...
So yeah, we get to, as Komina says, girl boss feminism, exactly. And that's, again, I guess this is the main thing that we have been talking about in the last 2 weeks, this inherent incredible ability of the system to just turn everything into its own use, because we're not addressing the core issue, which is, as always, the class dichotomy, right?
Traditional Americans for a long time argued that women just were naturally not good at things like math or science.
By the way, we're drinking some water. We're celebrating Women's Day. Ajde, živeli, motherfuckeri, živeli!
Or they weren't naturally competitive enough to be athletes, or they were naturally not X or naturally not Y. And then when the Soviet Union actually did it, either you had to argue, and by the way, some of them did, that Soviet women weren't really women.
Oh, right.
There's something unique about what was going over there. Or you had to admit that maybe women could be really good mathematicians or chess players or athletes.
And it's kind of like the options there are that we were wrong, or they can be really good at that. It sucks for women and womanhood and our definitions, but it's worth it because of national security to overcome.
Exactly what Katie said. It's extra insane when you see minorities of the imperial core, which are hardcore capitalists. But I would absolutely argue that seeing women that are supportive of the status quo or neoliberalism or capitalism in general is the ultimate pick-me-girl attitude, right? Almost maybe not as bad as, Nazi women, right? That's just pathetic. Just fucking plain old pathetic. You want to be a part of a crew that never fucking wanted you.
Exactly.
To embrace this unnatural...
unnatural thing, which is women working outside the home and in male professions,
Right. And can you talk about some of the sex studies in terms of satisfaction and, the studies that you cite which support the claim that sex is better in socialist countries for women?
Okay, so the studies that are specifically cited in the book are a series of studies that were done, the first in 1988, so prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall, by a sexologist in East Germany called Kurt Stark and his colleagues. And then because of the results, they were replicated after '89. So the first thing I want to say is that there's always a problem with self-reported data. So obviously people are answering these questions. And one of the critiques of these studies is that the women who were living under communism didn't answer truthfully or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But after 89, they were free to answer as they wanted. And there were similar results. The study was done over and over again in a variety of different ways. So the actual numbers are fascinating. So the two proxy questions for sexual satisfaction. The first is, the last time when you had sex, were you happy? And, did you feel happy? And, so this is kind of a weird way of saying, was it good or not? So GDR women said that 82% of the time, the last sexual encounter that they had, they were happy. Compared to women in the West.
Dude, that's because dude. That's because in the GDR, whenever somebody had sex, they would call up the Stasi, and the Stasi would walk inside and literally stand above the bed, looking at them. And then while they're having sex, he would hold up a picture of Stalin and hold it right above them. So if the guy is laying down, he would see a picture of Stalin instead of the woman he's having sex with. And the woman would be granted a picture of Stalin to hold on her breasts so that he can caress Stalin as well. That is why they were coming all the time. Unironically, if you said this in 1974 to a random American, that this is how sex is forced on the people in the evil communism, 99% of them were like, "Oh, really? Oh my God!" And then Stalin came in with a spoon and ate all their toothbrushes. In the meanwhile, they're having the best sex of their lives, and the Yanks are fucking sleeping in separate beds. My brother in Christ.
So this would be the FRG.
Real authoritarianism is when you're forced into good sex. In the West, forced sex. In communism, forced good sex, okay? Every man gets taken out and shot if he doesn't make his woman come at least once every 2 intercourses. Okay, we can't ask too much of men, okay? They're men, okay? You will always have around 50% of the male population that cannot find the clit. But I could argue in capitalism, 80% of them don't know it. And when we enter socialism, 50%. Only don't know where it is.
the West Germans, only
new theory dropped right now.
Said they were
big
happy.
Discrepancy, yeah.
That's a huge discrepancy, okay? And then they get a little bit deeper into, again, these double entendres, so to speak. So the second way...
Oh, not so to speak, it's not to very speak.
Ask the question is, did your last sexual encounter leave you feeling satisfied? That's how they ask the question. GDR women, 75% said yes. GDR men, 74% said yes. So about equal.
Sure.
Oh my God, chat. This proves communism is against men. 1% less of men said. This proves old red pill theories that if you concentrate on the women's pleasure, then you will get nothing out of it. God fucking damn it. We got owned, chat.
With West German men, it's 84% of men said, yeah, I was satisfied after my last sexual encounter, but only 46% of West German women. So that's less than half of West German women compared to 75% of East German women. So this sort of shows you that there's something going on. The other thing that I think is really interesting is preferences for marriage. So let's say you're dating, you're a percentage of the people that you're dating or that you might date. And of course, this is all heterosexual data that bears, these studies focus specifically on opposite sex couples. So in the east of Germany, the communist part of Germany, 73% of women and 74% of men said that they were interested in getting married. Like if they found the right person, they would be cool with that, right? Whereas in the western part, the capitalist part of Germany, 71% of women said that they would be interested in getting married, but only 57% of men.
Wow.
So, you have these really interesting discrepancies, which means that there's something there that is making maybe not the actual experience, but the way you reflect on that experience, if we're talking about self-reported data, significantly.
I mean, we watched a couple of videos here on the stream when it comes to applying this to at least modern capitalism. I don't know how it was before 1989 when East Germany still existed, but a lot of people do not want to get married, obviously, because we've outgrown the institution from their perspective, etc., etc. But a lot don't because they cannot afford it, because they cannot afford to run a family, because they cannot afford to tell their partner, hey, you can completely rely on me, and their partner to tell them, hey, you can completely rely on me as well, because there's just no time or ability for them to enter into such a serious contract with another person. I mean, they're probably fucking 32 and they still can't figure out, their accommodation. And now they gotta like live together with another human being and dedicate their entire life to them. Fucking live through all of this. Fuck no. But the more a quote unquote state gives you leeway with all these things, meaning that you don't have to think about them, the higher the chance it is that you're going to be thinking about other aspects of your life except just surviving, the classic Maslow pyramid kind of perspective. That very much so still applies to finding partners, and very much so applies to sex in general. I mean, just like have sex once when you have so many things on your mind, and have sex once when you don't. Obviously, one is going to be much more relaxed and therefore will be hella more enjoyable for both parties involved, or all 10 parties involved. Don't let me judge here. Same applies to a systematic analysis. If you live in a society which does not give you comfort, then you are thinking about everything except the moment in which you are now, which, let's be honest, is arguably the most important thing when it comes to having just a great time, orgasmic or non, when you're with someone or someones, because just how kinky chat is.
Different in the East that is socialist compared to the West that is capitalist. And so what I tried to do in the book is to try to tease out what exactly was going on in that data.
Regular core, everything sucks while you're under stress. I mean, puns, yes. That was a great analysis. That was a great video as well. I really enjoyed that.
How do you acquire the internet?
Oh yeah, that's the next one that I immediately saw. I clicked on this video and it has 2.9 thousand views. And the immediate thing that popped up as a recommendation right next to it is a 1.3 million video by Jordan B. Peterson on how to get a woman's attention. Mods, if we could change the title of the video so we watch this as well. And